Good afternoon. My name is Aisha Chugtai, and I am the chair of the Budget Committee. I'm going to call to order our meeting for Monday, October 20th, 2025. Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify the presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Payne, absent. Wansley, absent. Rainville,
Present.
Vita,
Present.
Ellison, absent. Osman, absent. Cashman,
Present.
Jenkins, absent. Chavez,
Present.
Chowdhury,
Present.
Palmisano,
Present.
Vice Chair Koski,
Present.
Chair Chugtai.
Present.
That is 8 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. I will also remind my colleagues that we will be using speaker management today, so please make sure to sign in. Our first item on the agenda is department presentations related to the mayor's recommended 2026 budget from the Health Department, the Youth Coordinating Board, and Information Technology and Technology Improvement Plan. I'll first invite Health Commissioner Damone Chaplin to begin the first presentation. Welcome, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Chair Chugtai and Budget Committee. My name is Damone Chaplin. I'm the Health Commissioner for the Minneapolis Health Department, and today I'll be presenting the 2026 Mayor's recommended budget for the Minneapolis Health Department. The Minneapolis Health Department is one of 4 departments within the Development, Health, and Livability line of business of the Office of Public Service under Deputy City Operations Officer Brett Jelly. The Health Department is composed of approximately 172 staff, supporting 6 divisions and approximately 20 programs and services. We began revising phase 1 of our strategic plan process earlier this year. That process led to the development of our mission, vision, and priorities for the department. The mission of the Minneapolis Health Department is to promote equitable health outcomes and eliminate health disparities. Our vision is health justice, where everyone has access to positive and equitable health outcomes. Our priorities have been consistent. The Minneapolis Health Department is committed to being an anti-racist organization that centers equity in everything that we do. To advance equitable health outcomes, we focused on securing flexible and sustainable funding that allows us to lead with stability and impact. We're also strengthening our foundational infrastructure, the communication tools, data systems, and technology that help us serve our community and support our staff effectively. Our people remain our greatest assets, and we're investing in a diverse, adaptable workforce by cultivating leadership and supporting career growth. Finally, we recognize that our success depends on collaboration, so we're building and nurturing authentic partnerships both within the city and across the community to advance our shared vision of a healthier, more equitable Minneapolis. Our mission, vision, and strategic priorities are informed by information collected through our community health needs assessment process. That process has led to the identification of 5 key community health priorities: chronic stress among parents and caregivers, infectious disease prevention and control, substance use disorder, mental health, and access to health services for the homeless, infant mortality, maternal and adolescent health, and well-being. Over the past year, the Minneapolis Health Department has made strong progress across key initiatives, completing 100% of mental health screenings in school-based clinics, conducting over 2,800 mental health visits, strengthening the city's tobacco ordinance, launching the mobile medical unit to reach more than 750 community members, expanding our opioid response efforts through new partnerships in Narcan vending machines, and advancing environmental health programs with new online tools and successful state audits. However, these accomplishments face risk due to heavy reliance on federal and state funding. And so the Minneapolis Health Department seeks to create a city that is a healthy place to live, work, and play through our Outcomes Minneapolis database. Our performance dashboards include metrics on the following items: our food, lodging, and pools routine inspections, follow-up inspections through our food, lodging, and pools program, residential weatherization, preventive lead paint mitigation, and greenhouse gas reductions. And you can see here through our performance measures for 2025, we're on target to meet our 2025 targets, and in some situations to exceed those, particularly when we look at our residential weatherization programs. And so when we look at our budget for 2026, we see a cumulative budget for grants and general fund of about $46 million. And likewise, through our programming, you see slight increases from 25 to 26 as a result of increasing grants that we've received over the year. When we look at our FTEs for 2026, we have a total of 171.5 FTEs, with a slight reduction from 25 to 26 as a result of the administrative targets. We currently have 9.8 FTEs. 4.8 of those currently have a number of vacancies of 9.8 FTEs. 4.8 of those FTEs are on hold due to funding considerations. 3 of those FTEs are actively in the hiring process, and 2 positions were recently inactivated and will not be backfilled. And so when we look at our programs, our environmental programs oversee inspections, permits, and city ordinances while advancing initiatives like the Green Cost Share, city trees, carbon sequestration through biochar. These efforts not only improve air and environmental quality, but also save money and increase sustainability across all property sectors, avoiding more than 21,000 tons of CO2 emissions each year through clean energy efficiency and green urban spaces. When we look at our core infrastructure, we focus on managing resources effectively, promoting equity in every policy and practice, and maintaining high operational standards aligned with national best practices. Our work includes budget management, grants and contract oversight, administrative support, and services that strengthen public health operations, all guided by efficient, standardized processes that ensure accountability and excellence. So our school-based clinics are meeting teens where they are, providing integrated physical and mental health care, outreach, and opportunities for growth. This past year, we served 2,655 unique students through our over 10,800 visits and 2,800 additional mental health sessions. Screening rates for chlamydia and gonorrhea rose by 22%, and HIV testing increased by 50%. Outreach efforts reached nearly 27,000 students, with 98% reporting satisfaction and 99.7% saying they would return and recommend the clinic. Our Lead in Healthy Homes program primarily responds to lead blood poisonings in children. Investments made by council and the mayor's office over the last few years have led to over 1,000 preventative interventions in homes. No doubt avoiding some children from ever being lead poisoned in the first place. and we have seen a 26% reduction in lead poisoning in 2025. The Minneapolis Health Department safeguards residents and visitors by preventing disease and injury in food, lodging, pool, and body art establishments through inspections, education, and outbreak investigations. Our team provides timely inspection, information, and compliance guidance to businesses while offering both in-person and online food safety trainings. This year, 40 businesses participated in our serving safety program, with 168 in-person sessions reaching 443 learners, leading to 41% reduction in violations. Additionally, 479 completed online food safety courses, 237 completed allergen trainings, and 7 in-person classes served 144 learners. All inspections were completed on time, ensuring high standards of public health protection across the city. The City of Minneapolis gets its authority to license, inspect, and enforce through delegation agreements with the Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, as well as through Minneapolis Code of Ordinances. Family and Early Childhood Program, we promote healthy birth outcomes, positive parent-child relationships, and school readiness for providing family home visiting, education, outreach, and access to immunizations. Through partnerships with Hennepin County, more than 1,400 individuals received home visiting services supporting family health, growth, and self-sufficiency. Between January and June, we conducted 28 vaccination clinics for children and adults and reached over 1,100 people with immunization education at community events, ensuring families are supported, informed, and children are ready to thrive in school. Through our youth development and sexual health program, we ensure equitable investments in youth-serving organizations that meet the needs of vulnerable young people and promote positive youth development. Our work focuses on comprehensive sexual health education, STI testing, pregnancy prevention, and youth empowerment initiatives, including partnerships through the Child Friendly Cities and after-school programs. This year, over 1,200 STI tests were conducted. More than 1,100 youths received education or care coordination, and 17 youth were trained as peer educators. Our sustainability team are the architects for climate policy and outreach and community. They are specialists in technical research and best practices across the country. Through the Climate Legacy Initiative, they have been working across the enterprise to put our climate equity plan into action. 2026 will be the first year of an industrial specialist in the group to target large greenhouse gas emissions. Our opioid response team, we are addressing the opioid epidemic by ensuring residents, organizations, and businesses have the tools and support they need to reduce harm and save lives. Through strong partnerships with the county and state, we're strategically aligning opioid settlement investments and implementing a comprehensive harm reduction approach focused on prevention, treatment access, and community safety. Our harm reduction efforts are making a measurable impact across Minneapolis. Through syringe mitigation, more than 2,600 needles were safely collected by way of 311 requests, sweeps, and kiosks. Between January and June 2025, 752 boxes of nasal Narcan were distributed through vending machines, with another 233 boxes provided by the mobile medical unit in September and October. Since June of 2024, 213 Brixadi injections have been administered through the M-Health Fairview Emergency Department program, with record participation in September of 2025. The MMU has also played a vital role, attending 16 events, engaging over 700 individuals, and providing direct care, including wound care, health screenings, and treatment referrals for more than 100 people. Key initiatives include the syringe abatement, naloxone saturation, the mobile medical unit, and our Brixati project. Our Minneapolis Healthy Living initiatives, we're preventing chronic disease by partnering with schools, clinics, hospitals, workplaces, and community organizations to create lasting, healthy changes. Our work focuses on tobacco prevention, mental well-being, physical activity, and nutrition. This year, we strengthened the Minneapolis Commercial Tobacco Ordinance, setting a $25 minimum price for vapes and limiting where they can be sold. Thank you to the council for making that possible. 8 organizations adopted trauma-informed principles to better support employee well-being, and our Safe Routes to Schools program earned the National Vision Zero for Youth Leadership Award. To address food insecurity, we completed a 10-month Food Resource Navigator training with 7 community clinics, where Fairview's Navigator alone conducted 166 consultations and 65 referrals, helping connect residents to healthy food and brighter futures. Our Emergency Preparedness and Infectious Disease program, we're strengthening public health preparedness by investing in community partnerships, trainings, and effective communication to ensure Minneapolis is ready for any emergency. This year, we engaged residents at 7 community events, renewed 7 partnership agreements, and shared preparedness updates with over 8,000 subscribers. Our team supported 2 active responses and took part in 4 preparedness trainings and exercises while continuing to refine operational plans and collaborate across work groups, building a more resilient and informed community, ready to respond when it matters most. The epidemiology team continues to follow up on pertussis, varicella, and foodborne illnesses, conducting close to 100 investigations through early October. The EP team is also working closely with Hennepin County on measles contacts follow-up and continues to provide support to the Minneapolis Public Schools on infectious disease and other health-related issues. The EP team provides ongoing support to the Health Department on program evaluation, data analysis, and/or interpretation. Our public health infrastructure program, we're building a skilled and resilient public health workforce by investing in education, leadership, and green career pathways that promote equity and sustainability. Through partnerships with multiple community programs, we're helping youth explore careers in green construction, solar energy, sustainable land care, and energy efficiency. So far, 230 youth have participated in career exploration activities, 206 have earned or worked towards credentials, and 110 have taken part in specialized education programs, empowering the next generation to lead in both public health and environmental sustainability. We're strengthening public health infrastructure by investing in workforce development and community partnerships. This year, we launched the Professional Pathways Institute for staff, the Public Health Pathways Program, for interns, and the Community Institute for partners. Over 100 staff completed REI groundwater training, more than 90 trained in health literacy, and 12 enrolled in the accredited New to Public Health program. We also hosted 5 equity learning sessions with 159 participants, supported 6 community-led public health projects, and provided hands-on experiences to 13 interns, building capacity and advancing equity across our public health system. Through our homegrown Minneapolis program, We're supporting Minneapolis in growing, distributing, and enjoying healthy, sustainable, locally grown food while reducing waste. Key initiatives include community-led homegrown CLI projects, the Food Forward 86 Food Waste Event Series, the Urban Farm and Garden Community Ownership and Garden Lease Programs, and collaboration with farmers markets through the Minneapolis Food Vision. This year, 14 community projects were funded. $400,000 in USDA grant funding was secured for composting and food waste reduction, and the Urban Farm and Garden Community Ownership Program was launched, strengthening local food systems and sustainability efforts. And so lastly, the Minneapolis Health Department had a budget reduction target of 2%. Nearly all of our funding supports either personnel or contractual services. The vast majority of our proposed reduction came from contractual services in order to preserve staff. There is a 1 FTE reduction in the school-based clinics and to help personnel. This position reduction is funded 0.5 by general fund and 0.5 from a grant. That concludes my presentation and open for questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Commissioner. Colleagues, are there any questions or comments? I'll recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Director, for this presentation. When I was looking at the report beforehand, I was disheartened to see the loss of an FTE for school-based mental health counseling. I think that our schools need more of this, not less. And so can you just share with us a little bit about how you came to this decision and thoughts on how we can make up that ever-widening gap that this kind of thing leaves behind?
Yeah, it's a situation that we're currently working on with the administration. We're hoping to be able to salvage an FTE through some other means. So we're currently working with the administration to hope to be able to rectify that.
Okay. And then as listed as a risk back on slide 6, can you, I see the health department as one of the biggest losers in the threat of loss of federal funds. How are you and your team preparing for that?
Yeah, Councilmember Palmisano, Council Chair Chuck Dye. We have a contingency plan that we're working on. We have a team, and so as the grants become more vulnerable, we pull the team together along with HR and legal to figure out how best to manipulate and maneuver around those potential grant reductions. We really haven't seen that as of yet, but we're keeping our eyes on the ball because it's potentially could be happening. So we're in conversations with the mayor's office, our legal team and HR, so that when those situations do arise that we're able to respond to them. So we have a team internally that works on contingency planning for those grant programs.
Thank you. And then can you be a little more specific about the impact of loss of about $300,000 of contractual funds for next year? Where will those be taken from?
Yeah, we have some strategies that we're thinking about. We're working with the administration right now to figure out how best to mitigate any of those losses. And so we're in constant conversations with the administration to try and reduce any of those losses. So we have some strategies that we're thinking about that we're working with the administration.
Thank you.
Before we continue with discussion, I'll note that we have been joined in this committee meeting by Council President Payne. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Vita, followed by Vice Chair Koski.
Thank you, Chair Chuck Ty. Thank you, Commissioner, for this presentation. Could you elaborate a little bit more on Councilmember Palmisano's question about the specifics on those contractual services? Like who do you know, like some folks that we're contracting with, or like the sort of services that we're going to be losing?
Yeah, there's a variety of services that we'll be losing. A lot of those are Some of those are in our maternal and child health programs. Some of those are around our immunizations. We're hoping to be able to provide some of those services through some other means. One of those being our MMU, if we can. And so we're thinking about some other strategies right now. But there's a variety of spaces where those contracts will be impacting.
Thank you. Can we get a staff memo, please, for the specifics on what this 291, like the loss of whatever for this, just so we know the impact and the specific programs that I think is super important to know what we could be losing with the 291. And then also, you kind of spoke to it a little bit, but just wondering if you could possibly partner with OCS. I know they have that, the trauma dollars, and does that fit for the one FTE we're going to lose in the school? That's a huge impact, and I don't think we can afford to lose such a important service right now. So just wondering if you did kind of touch on it a little bit, that there will be some contact with other departments to try to figure out. But I know they just give out a lot of contracts for trauma-informed care, and then the opioid crisis response funds too kind of fit into a large pot of money that they have over there. And just wondering if not yet, when will there be conversations about how we can get money from these other departments?
Councilmember Vitar, Chair Chugtai, all options are on the table. We are looking to mitigate this loss in a bunch of different ways. So we're not saying no. We're open to any opportunities to collaborate to salvage any of the services that we're providing. So all options are on the table.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next I'll recognize Vice Chair Koski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for the presentation. Just a quick question about the special revenue expenses. I noticed in the budget book increasing from about $15.5 million in 2025 to about $20.5 million in 2026. I just wondering if you can just elaborate a little bit more on, these additional dollars. Where are they going? Where are these expenses going? And can you explain in detail what this increase funds and which programs the expense covers?
Councilmember Koski, Chair Chugtai, I would love to provide that to you in a memo.
Oh, sure.
To council.
Yep, no problem.
Most of those are through grants that we've received.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I'll forward the question to the clerk so that they have it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am not seeing anyone else seeking to be recognized, so I will thank you for your time and ask the clerk to file that presentation.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And next we will welcome a presentation from the Youth Coordinating Board. For that, I will invite Executive Director Ann DeGroot to join us and begin that presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Appreciate being here today. I'm Ann DeGroot. I'm the Executive Director of the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board. And let me just say that this is our 40th year in operation in the city of Minneapolis and working with our other joint powers partners. This is the Hennepin County, the Minneapolis Public Schools, and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. Before I talk about the Youth Coordinating Board, I want to talk about our kids. We, in the city of Minneapolis, are about 85,000 young people and children, ages 0 through 18. So that's about 20% of the people who live in Minneapolis. If you add the 18 to 24-year-olds, we add another 60,000. So about 1/3 of our residents are young. We're a pretty youthful city. It's a very diverse group of citizens in the city of Minneapolis, racially, and in terms of where people come from. People in our city come from all over the world and speak a number of languages in their home. And I know this isn't news to you, but I want to say it because I know you're not the only people listening to what I have to say. And one of the things I want to remind people of here, because it is being heard more broadly than with you, is that in addition to all of the things that our young people are dealing with in their lives, some normal things like homework and doing the dishes, and some things that are much more difficult, not having enough to eat, not having a place to live, dealing with violence in their homes, etc. They are now this year also dealing with the threat of being deported or approached by masked people who might deport them or harm them or their family members. This is a big threat to our young people, and it is likely going to ramp up. And I know you know that, and I know you're doing what you can as a city council about it, but I want to remind people that this is happening. At the Youth Coordinating Board, we're working very hard to help our young people and youth work professionals know what to do if that should happen. And it is just another stressor our young people feel, and it's just another threat to their well-being, which is, of course, what we're concerned with, is their well-being. Let me tell you a little bit about the Youth Coordinating Board and what we do. We work in 3 areas. We work in early childhood. The funding for early childhood comes from the state of Minnesota. We work in family, friend, and neighbor care. Some of you will have received, all of you should have received an invitation to a screening we're doing tomorrow for a documentary called Dream Catchers. This is a documentary done for public TV of the early childhood care system in Minnesota, which we should be very proud of because it's actually a pretty good system, at least it is right now. And that is something that we worked with the producers on, and it features one of our great child care centers in Minneapolis up in the north side called La Crèche. So I hope you are able to come tomorrow. If not, we can get you the film so you can take a look at it. I think it's going to be great, well attended. Secondly, we work in the area of youth development. Most of our work here is in after school, and we work with our after school providers throughout the city to make sure that they have the training and the resources that they need to be able to work with our young people. They are now facing threats from cuts from the federal government. We've never had enough money for after-school programming in the city of Minneapolis, ever. But now we have much less. And the threats are that we will be having way less. The big amount of money that comes to everybody in the country for after-school programming is called 21st Century Community Learning Center grants. And the federal government has held those, and we're not sure what they're going to do next. But if we lose those, many of our programs will lose that money. And the final area we work in is in youth engagement. And our youth engagement work primarily centers around the Minneapolis Youth Congress, group of 8th through 12th graders who we're very proud of in Minneapolis, who help us understand what the perspective is of young people in terms of the work that we do. Want to invite you to their oath of office, which is going to be November 13th in the atrium. They all step up and they swear an oath, just like you do. It's not the same oath, though, because I wrote theirs, so I can tell you it's not the same. But it's a wonderful event, and they come. They're very serious about it, and they do their work for the whole year. We also do some work in the outreach area. Primarily now our work is in training, and we also do some outreach events for young people. Here's our chart. Our organizational chart's pretty simple. It's pretty flat. We have a board of 10 elected officials, including Councilmember Koski and Councilmember Jenkins from the City Council. They come together, and they're a governance body. They hire me. They've kept me. And we have 6 staff people who work here. 3 in the different program areas, I thought, 1 in each of the areas. And we have a communications staff, an accountant, and a strategic planning specialist to support those areas to try to get our work done as efficiently and effectively as possible. One thing I want to say about our work is a systems change work or social change work. It is not programmatic work in the kind of traditional sense. We don't provide things to people, we provide systems change work. And one of the big areas we're working in right now, it'll show up later a little bit, but I might as well say, is we understand from our young people that what they're concerned about is their safety and well-being. So we are doing the job of coordinating and bringing together people from our 4 public jurisdictions to look at the area of safety and well-being. And we are asking them to help us think about how, as a group of people who are tasked with ensuring that our young people and our children are safe, how do we bring all of ourselves together to bring our resources and our brains, which is a resource, together to help make that better? How do we have a better ecosystem for that? Okay? Everybody's working. They're doing great work. We all do really good work. But a lot of times we're working in isolation or working without connecting to each other. So how do we come together? So that's a big thing that we've been working on. We had our first big convening October 1st. We have another one December 3rd. The focus of that convening is mental health, which is always the number one issue for young people. So I talked about the Youth Congress. Last year we served 30 young people. We're starting our new cohort this year. There we go. They do a variety of things. They reviewed the 21st Century Community Learning Center grants for the Department of Education this year. It was a great project for them. They have met with Hennepin County staff to support the awareness of the Youth Stabilization Center at 1800 Chicago Avenue and give feedback on that. Judge Fellman, who is the presiding judge of juvenile court, invited them to come to court and watch what happens in juvenile court, and they did that. They sat in on some hearings, and they learned from him what happens over there. And they've been participating in the Metro Transit Blue Line Extension Project, among a number of other things that they have done as a youth congress. They divide into committees. The committees do tremendous work, but these are some of the things that they have done. We would invite you, in addition to being part of their oath of office, to let us know if you'd like to come see them and talk with them in the course of your work about what kinds of things you might want to know from them that might interest you. Our after-school work, big part of our work, we use some of the money that the city allocates to us to help fund some of the after-school programming in Minneapolis. And this has been really important to them, especially as they have seen cuts in their programming. We give money to Minneapolis Community Education, which is through Minneapolis Public Schools, to the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and also to the libraries for the Minneapolis Teen Tech Centers. They have provided over 5,000 hours of programming with that funding. They have 64 community partners with that funding. And they have served over 6,000 young people. That's a duplicated number at this point. I'm trying to sort that out a little bit better for you. But we also provide training. We provide networking for them, and we bring them together so that they can share their own resources so that they're not all working in isolation either. Our outreach team provides Hard in the Paint Hoops basketball camps in the summertime. For young people, we do 4 of them. You can see one at Brian Coyle Community Center, one at Phillips Community Center, and 2 at Camden High School in the summertime. And we have served this summer 169 young people through that. I was asked to talk a little bit about risks, and I already talked about government funding cuts for after-school programming. I can tell you this, there's some state money there wasn't before, but it's running out this year. I can also tell you that there isn't anyone coming in to pick it up. People say, well, just write a foundation grant. They're not picking it up. I just should let you know that. But so funding cuts are really a risk. And programs, so that leads to programs having less stable funding. So they have less money to offer so they offer less programming to kids, especially kids who can't afford it. And we have staff leaving the field. It's not unlike early childhood in a way. There's not as many stable jobs, and there's not as many benefits. But the bottom line for all of this, really, is that the safety and well-being of our children's at risk. You know, if you think about our kids after school, you think about kids on release days. If their parents have to work, what are they doing if they don't have something to do that is structured where they can go? They have our wonderful parks, and they go to the parks. But not all kids go to the parks. So what happens? Their safety and well-being is at risk, and we need to be constantly thinking about that. So a few things, other things you may have heard about us. I just told you about the Forum for Safety and Well-Being, this convening we're doing. You've probably heard of child-friendly cities, and at some point it'd be great to come back with the health department and talk more about what we're doing in that area. We're working on our second designation, which we will get. The film, The Dreamcatcher, Stories Eliminating Barriers for Children and Families, premieres tomorrow at the library. We're creating a resource contact directory, which we're calling the phone book. You all remember phone books? Yeah? And we've just updated our website, so I hope you take a look at that. And I think I'll end it there with if people have questions, because otherwise I could really talk for a long time, and I know your time is limited. So please feel free to ask any questions or make comments that you'd like to make.
Thank you. Colleagues, are there any questions related to this presentation? I will recognize Council President Payne, followed by Council Member Rainville.
Thank you, Vice President Chugtai. Thank you for this presentation. I was curious, I know last Community Connection Conference, we had a really big workshop with the board, and I thought it was just like a really great way to just get a lot of people involved and have that intermingling of elected people, everyday residents, and some of our youth leaders. Knowing that that has been cut in the current budget recommendation, what would be the typical venue to get that type of collaboration, or is there no other type of venue than that? And specifically, what would be the costs that we need to be considering of uniquely bringing that type of event together outside of the context of the Community Connections Conference?
Yeah, Committee Chair and Council Member, that's a really good question. We are going to miss the Community Connections Conference. That's a big loss. We had, in fact, been talking with Neighborhoods and Community Relations this year about having a bigger youth presence and the ability to do more of that this year, and it's just not going to happen. It's not realistic given the kinds of costs that there would be associated with bringing that together. We are hoping to have some kind of a youth summit. As you may know, the libraries, the parks, the schools, a number of other organizations have youth-led advisory type groups, sort of like the Youth Congress. So we would like to really bring them all together, but it would really be youth-based. There would not necessarily be other adults. There would not necessarily be adults in the room like there was at that event that you were at. And that event was very helpful to us. I mean, it gave us information we didn't get anywhere else. So to be able to replicate what you're talking about would cost quite a bit of money, because we would need space, we would need food, we would need to bring people in. And I just don't see it happening in the same efficient way that did. I could see us bringing our funds together to bring young people together, because we do have some ability to do that, although it would take some different kind of energy behind it. So the loss of the Community Connections Conference is significant for us and our ability to do exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you for that. I mean, it really highlights, NCR leads the Community Connections Conference, but it's not strictly an NCR activity. I mean, we're getting a lot of overlapping goals being met by bringing that many people and that many city departments together. I think the alternative would be a youth summit, a public safety summit, a public health summit, all of which would cost probably on par to the one out-of-pocket expense of the one Community Connection Conference. So I think that's something that we really need to take into light as we think about this budget. So thank you.
Yes, Council President, thank you for that question.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Groot, thank you for your time today. And I'm sorry if I missed this, but how much do we contribute to your budget out of all the entities? We being the city of Minneapolis.
Yeah. Madam Chair and Council Member Rainville, the joint powers fee is not going to get it exactly right, but it's almost $90,000. It's 89 something. I don't have it written down here with me. And then there's a general fund contribution of about $360,000.
So 90,000 from each agency.
From the three of our joint powers members contribute 90,000, and the park board contributes about 20,000. Because they're our smallest
Okay.
entity.
And then the city of Minneapolis contribution is $360,000.
In addition, through general.
In
fund.
addition to the 90,000.
That's correct.
So a simple answer might be $450,000.
Yeah,
Great. Thank you.
that's right. And that is about what the county also contributes.
And the park board only does 20,000.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm not seeing anyone else in queue. I will thank you for your time and ask the clerk to file that presentation.
Thank you all.
Thank you. With that, we are now ready to move to our next presentation, which is from the Information Technology Department and the Technology Improvement Plan. For that, I will invite our Chief Information Officer, Paul Cameron, to join us and begin that presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Chugtai and members of the Budget Committee. I'm Paul Cameron, the CIO for the city, and I'm here to present to you the Mayor's recommended 2026 budget for the IT department. There are no new budget requests included in this presentation. After this presentation, I will be presenting on the Technology Improvement Plan, or TIP. The IT department is part of the internal services area of the Office of Public Service, led by Deputy COO Soray Garnett-Huhuli. The IT department is comprised of 8 divisions with 108 FTEs recommended in the 2026 budget. On the org chart, you can see the breakdown of FTEs by division. All the divisions report to me. The divisions are Infrastructure, Security Services, Project Management Office, Enterprise Resource Planning, Enterprise Data and Solutions, Business Services Portfolio, Customer Support and Relations, and Vendor Management and Contract Services. The mission of the IT department is to deliver reliable and secure technology services across all departments to serve the residents of Minneapolis. We have 3 priority objectives. The first is maintain system health and security. The city enterprise utilizes dozens of major business systems. We proactively monitor, maintain, protect, and secure city technology systems and data to ensure reliability and performance with minimal service disruptions. The second priority objective is workforce enablement. We look to equip city employees with the tools, technology, and support they need to work efficiently, collaborate effectively, and deliver high-quality public services. The third priority objective is enterprise platform adoption. We promote consistent use of city-supported enterprise platforms to improve collaboration, efficiency, and data-driven decision-making. This also allows for greater transparency and information sharing. We invest in the people, skills, and outreach related to our major platforms. So I'd like to take a couple minutes to share some of the performance measures we have in Outcomes Minneapolis. The first 2 measures are related to maintaining system health and security. The first measure is looking at our major systems across the enterprise, which is around 30. and whether we are keeping those systems up to date. We try to look at these systems holistically. In addition to the current software version, we also evaluate the underlying hardware the software runs on, the contract status, and how well the vendor is keeping the software current. Our goal is to have 100% of major systems on a current release or have a plan in place to achieve that. Around 3/4 of our systems are current, while the other quarter have a plan in place. The second measure is looking at our network and server availability. Our goal for network connectivity is uptime of greater than 99.9%. We are meeting this objective. Our goal for servers is 100% uptime. We fell just short of that over the last year. The next performance metrics I'd like to cover are related to workforce enablement. These metrics are most directly related to the IT service desk, but are linked to the IT department's overall effectiveness in supporting the city. They are fairly standard measures for an IT call center. Our goals for these measures are at the high end for the industry. We are meeting our target on 3 of these metrics. The first call resolution metric is one we are a bit short of our target. This is an area where we are continually looking at performance improvements around this. So moving on to achievements and risks from the last year. I'll highlight a few themes now and provide additional details on these as I discuss the individual budget programs. The first theme I want to cover is platform modernization. We look at platforms as a shared system that supports multiple processes or departments. Examples include our Enterprise Analytics Hub, where we consolidate data from individual systems. This platform includes our data analysis and visualization tools. Other examples include the 2 biggest projects I'll talk about in the Technology Improvement Plan, our ERP platform, which is our core HR, finance, and payroll software, and our 311 CRM platform. Other examples would be our website platform and ELMS, or the city's enterprise land management system. The goals for platform modernization are consolidation of systems, migrating to software as a service where appropriate, and improving our cybersecurity posture. It also helps us control costs, focus our support skills and knowledge for the most benefit across the enterprise, reduce the footprint we need to protect from a cyber and data security standpoint, and allows for sharing of ideas and lessons learned between departments. Next on the list is cybersecurity, which is also listed as a risk. As a department, we are continuously investing in our cybersecurity efforts in a variety of ways. We utilize a layered approach to limit our exposure to cyber attacks and also minimize the spread of cyber attacks if something gets in. This includes additional layers around publicly accessible systems. One of the most recent additions is partnering with the state of Minnesota using their whole-of-state cybersecurity plan. We are also investing and expanding our security awareness training for employees, helping them identify social engineering attacks. In addition, we are partnering with the Communications Department, 311, and others on a public awareness campaign related to social engineering attacks targeting residents of Minneapolis. We are continuing to improve our identity and access management processes and tools. The third theme I want to highlight is the continued effort on streamlining and automating work. This helps us improve efficiency, reduce errors, and allow staff to grow skills in new areas. The last theme I want to highlight, where I'm proud of the work we've done as a city, is the numerous facilities projects. I feel like IT and property services have really grown this year in how we collaborate as more and more technology is put into new and updated facilities. The team has worked on the first precinct, City Hall restack, grain exchange for MPD, the Lake Street Community Safety Center, the Hawthorne facility, and planning for the new 3rd Precinct Community Safety Center. Moving on to risks, the 2 I've listed are multifaceted in their impact. Cybersecurity tops this list and was also identified by the Emergency Management Department as a high risk for the city. Mitigating this risk in some fashion is baked into almost all of the work that we do. There are three main areas of cybersecurity I'd like to highlight. First is ransomware. This is the most well-known threat that we face, as we read about it in the news on an almost daily basis. The scope for this risk is increasing as we rely more heavily on technology. Ransomware generally involves stealing data or locking systems and holding them hostage. The second risk is because we are a government. We manage infrastructure and provide services that could be a target for bad actors. The third risk is one I alluded to earlier, social engineering attacks against our residents, where bad actors are impersonating the city in an attempt to have residents pay for something. The next risk I want to highlight is the pace of AI evolution. AI is a topic that feels like it is everywhere right now. There are two aspects of AI I'd like to discuss. The first ties back to cybersecurity. AI is being used to increase the sophistication of attacks, as well as decrease the time it takes for information to be turned into an attack. The social engineering attacks against our residents are examples of this. The second area I want to highlight around AI risks is related to the city's adoption of it. This mainly shows up around data protection. I would characterize this as a tug of war between enabling AI tools for city employees while also protecting city data. The IT department would like to promote ethical, non-discriminatory, and responsible use of AI. So moving on to the budget details. The Information Technology Department has a recommended 2026 budget of approximately $48.2 million, a slight increase from 2025. Each color on this chart represents the type of expense, with contractual services being the largest. Other expenses represented include salaries and wages, operating costs, and fringes. The contractual services number include enterprise software licensing costs as the majority of that expense. The next slide shows a different breakdown of the IT budget, this time by program. We have three programs in the IT department: Workforce Enablement Services, Infrastructure Services, and Decision Support Services. We'll cover these in more detail in a few slides. I do want to note that the larger size of the Workforce Enablement Services and Infrastructure Services programs reflect where we account for software, hardware, and managed services contracts. Our recommended FTE level in 2026 is 108. This is unchanged from 2025. We currently have 11 vacancies, 9 of which are in some state with HR for hiring. I do have a breakdown of where the 11 positions sit today. 3 are in the interview process. 2 are being reposted for a second time. 1 is nearing posting, and then 1 will be posted as a promotion. 2 are in the JAQ process, and then 2 of them are part of an internal reorganization. Next, I will go through each of the program areas and highlight goals and accomplishments. First is the Decision Support Services program area. The goals for this program are to enable strategic decision-making across the city through the use of timely data, analytics, software platforms, and expertise, improve transparency and communication with the residents of Minneapolis, protect the privacy of residents, and provide collaboration tools and support to the city enterprise to enable innovative solutions. These teams have been involved in a myriad of efforts, both large and small, to help the enterprise. We've partnered with city departments on 35 new public interactive dashboards, a 40% increase over 2024, and a 150% increase over 2023. One in particular I would like to call out is the 911 Recent Events Dashboard, which has received over 116,000 views since being published in mid-April of this year. The team has also implemented a new integration tool with 6 workflows created so far. We've completed over 150 enhancements to our ServiceNow platform for internal city processes. These span multiple departments, including HR, Public Works, and clerks, in addition to IT. We've designed new workflows in the enterprise land management system to align with the new processes, including prolonged vacancy enforcement, rental protection inquiry, ambassador snow and ice removal, and cannabis licensing. As of yesterday, we went live with 5 departments on an enterprise scheduling and time tracking tool. Moving on to the Infrastructure Services Program. The goals for this program are to enable a stable, secure, and responsive technology environment for the city by providing the hardware, software, systems, computing devices, and support. They also provide a friendly place for city employees to go for technology help. The divisions in this program are at the core of how the IT department supports the enterprise. For the outcomes and accomplishments, I wanted to highlight a few things from these divisions. We've retired an outdated document management system. This was a big one for the city and involved collaboration with almost all city departments over the last couple of years to complete. The system had been in place for over 20 years and was both expensive and time-consuming to keep running, as well as a cybersecurity risk. We've continued to work on our ongoing security awareness training for employees and are now expanding that to include a public awareness campaign. We're implementing more robust identity and access management processes. This ties to the layered security approach I talked about earlier and is part of the preparatory work we're doing for the ERP project. Over 900 devices were donated to PCs for People. These devices are refurbished and provided for free or at low cost to underserved communities in Minneapolis, with the goal of providing affordable computer access for all. We are continuing to consolidate mobile device management. This will improve our data security posture, reduce our reliance on vendors, and better align upgrades with the refresh cycle. We've also increased our on-site support at the Tech Hub. This is an appointment and walk-in location on the 10th floor of the Public Service Building for hands-on technical support for employees. We've seen a big increase in use over the last year. And lastly, we've resolved over 10,000 incident tickets and service requests. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this is the 10-year anniversary of our desk side and service desk teams being insourced. Having these teams as city employees has made a big difference in how we as a department provide service to the enterprise. The third program in IT is the Workforce Enablement Services Program. The goals for this program are to provide administration, enhancements, and support for citywide applications, lead organizational improvements through strategic initiatives and project management, manage citywide enterprise contracts to realize savings and increase productivity, and provide process and operational efficiencies to support the evolving needs of the city while upholding fiscal responsibility. Moving on to the outcomes and accomplishments, we are continuing our work in the IT Project Management Office on improvements. Our main focus this year is getting a better handle on how we intake non-standard requests from other city departments with goals of providing quicker initial responses, more transparency throughout the process, and better aligning and managing resources across the IT divisions. We've completed over 25 major new implementations and upgrades of software systems, completed work on over 75 contracts and contract amendments year to date. We've partnered with 911 to configure their system to support an embedded social worker, and we've partnered with Property Services and MPD on the new First Precinct building with expanded roll call room technology that spans all 5 precincts. We did have one reduction in our 2026 budget related to our food and beverage operating costs, which is highlighted on this slide. I would also like to highlight work the team did around the IT rate model and our software contracts. Normally, this number increases around 5% annually, but we work to keep that number under 1% this year, helping keep the IT budget flat. One of the bigger drivers for this was the retirement of the document management platform I mentioned earlier. As I wrap up this presentation, I want to acknowledge the dedication of the IT staff to keep the city functioning. We are often a group that operates behind the scenes. I hope you get a sense of the impact this team has across all parts of the city, and I'm proud to be leading this team. Thank you for your time today, and I can now stand for questions or continue with the tip presentation and save questions till the end.
We'll pause here and see if there are any questions before continuing to the technology improvement plan presentation. I see a couple of members in queue, so I'll first recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. And I guess I should say thank you for last week forcing me to go through cybersecurity training because I clicked on one of those emails that I shouldn't have, thinking it was a constituent email.
Got jumped.
I do see cybersecurity as one of the biggest threats to the entire enterprise from your perspective. And without giving away sensitive information, can you help us understand a little bit more on how you're preparing for that?
Yeah, Chair Chugtai, council member, thank you for the question. I think as I mentioned in the presentation, I feel like this is something where we don't implement a project or look at a system without looking at it through a lens of cybersecurity. And so that consolidation of systems approach, I think maybe more specifically, the program with the state of Minnesota that I'd mentioned will bring in some new tools that will provide additional layers of protection in addition to what we already have from an endpoint protection, but also from threat monitoring. And so kind of getting more real-time information on what's happening within the environment. Yeah, I think those are the items that come to mind right away.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. Could you please reassure me that we're doing things a lot different than St. Paul and thus their ransomware problem?
Yeah, Chair Chugtai, council member, and I how to best answer this. Having talked to people in St. Paul quite a bit about this incident and have a tremendous respect for what they're doing, I will share with you that there is no way to guarantee that we can be completely safe. The fact that we are connected to the internet, new vulnerabilities are discovered on a daily basis, and the speed of those is increasing in which those risks are turned into attacks. What we can try to do is to educate our employees around the ways in which social engineering attacks can happen. We can work to prevent those things from happening, and then if something does come in, to limit the spread of that happening. So one of the concepts, and this may be adding on to Councilmember Palmisano's question around what else are we doing. There's a concept within security called zero trust, which is basically no one should trust anyone from a security perspective. And so when we think about like where we were 10 or 15 years ago, we had, and sorry for getting more into the weeds on this, what I would classify as a very flat network, in which once you sort of got through the firewalls, you had access to sort of everything. Now things are much more compartmentalized, and so the idea is that it will just take longer for someone to sort of work their way through all of the compartmentalization that happens. And so I hope that answers your question, but I also don't want to provide a false assurance that these kinds of attacks are completely avoidable.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I just had a question for you, Director. I am seeing in your presentation that you have 11 vacancies in the department this year. I remember this was a number that caught my attention, so I went back and looked at your presentation from last year where the department had 12 vacancies. So I'm wondering if you can just speak to whether that generally speaking, these are the same positions. I know you mentioned there's a couple of positions that have to be reposted. So is it the same ones, or is it an entirely different set of 11 vacancies from last year?
Yeah, Chair Chugtai, thank you for the question. I don't have the exact list in front of me to compare to what was there last year. I know that some of them were probably there last year. I think we have been going through and trying to provide more detail opportunities to people, which will sort of result in sort of pushing the positions down into different areas that we've been moving through. We have struggled with some of them to get candidates to accept offers for the positions, which you can see for the reposting of a couple of them. And then there were a few, I believe, the ones related to the ERP program, where had been held open in some cases for a couple years. We are moving forward, and I believe those two were in the interview process right now.
Great.
And so just from kind of where we're at, I think we had one in which someone had turned down an offer, and so we're kind of moving on from there. So.
Awesome. I think then I'll have the clerk's note for administrative follow-up if we can have Director Cameron get back to us with the vacancies and comparing them to last year. I think that completes the discussion and questions for this section of your presentation. We're ready for you to continue with the technology improvement plan whenever you are.
Thank you. So I'll transition to the technology improvement plan at this point. I'll start with some background on the program before providing more detail on the budget numbers and the projects that are included. The technology improvement plan was started in 2024 as a way to better plan and budget for large major technology purchases or upgrades. Ongoing maintenance and support costs will be included in future years of the IT rate model. Finance and IT review requests for eligibility and financing, and then the city adopts a 6-year technology plan which will cover the years, in this case, 2026 through 2031. Only the 2026 dollars are appropriated. Projects in latter years are included as part of the long-range financial planning. The Executive Information Technology and Data Steering Committee receives, reviews, and deliberates on technology budget requests. This allows finance and IT to refine previous cost estimates, scope, and timeline in supplemental budget years. So this slide contains the projected costs for the 6 years of the technology improvement plan. I will have additional slides for the 311 login replacement, enterprise resource planning, Telemi building blocks, and the Loring Greenway rehabilitation. The other projects you see on this grid will go through a formal TIP review process next year to determine need and priority. We have included them here for transparency around the potential longer-term projects. These projects were identified by IT as areas where either hardware or software investment could be needed in future years. The non-information technology projects also do not go through the TIP process. This is an example of how the city can leverage the permanent improvement levy as an alternative to the general fund or bonding. This determination is made by finance in the budget office. The first project I would like to present is the 311 CRM system replacement. This project started out of a constituent services work group, which in turn was initiated by a legislative directive. The initial funding for this project was in 2025 through the TIP process. Our current 311 system is challenging in many ways. You have heard about some of those challenges from Director Nzimbi. I would like to highlight the collaboration across the enterprise around this project. We had 21 departments involved in the requirements process for the RFP, and 8 departments had team members assigned to the RFP review process. Some of the goals that the team is working towards are to improve transparency and accountability to residents, aggregate and streamline service requests, enhance data management, and support more resilient system integration. enable better mobile accessibility, implement a more comprehensive knowledge management repository, and facilitate effective collaboration across the enterprise and ensure equity and accessibility. The project team is nearing the end of the procurement process, and we are hoping to begin implementation in early 2026. We expect to finish the implementation in 2027. The funding requested for this project is $2 million in 2026 and $2.5 million in 2027. The total amount requested is $4.5 million over 2 years, and this budget supports the software costs during the implementation as well as the implementation costs itself. So the next project I would like to present is the Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP project, which we've also branded internally as Project Evolve. This project will modernize our city's HR, finance, and payroll systems and processes. Our current system is one you know of as Comet. We received initial funding for this effort in 2023. I'll highlight some of the main goals we have around this effort. All of these items cover multiple business lines and departments. A key aspect of why these are challenging today is that our current system, while the same software for both HR and finance, is actually 2 separate instances with over 5 years between implementations. There isn't a unified data model, and users for the overall system are managed separately. With the new system, we will have improved and streamlined business processes and workflow, enhanced data reporting, consolidation of multiple systems and integrations, and improved user experience and system navigation. This is an effort the city has been working on for several years with positive collaboration between the internal service departments of HR, finance, and IT. We have also included the Park Board through our early planning and evaluation processes with a goal of integrating them more holistically into the system than we have with our current platform. We signed a contract with a software provider earlier this year. In late summer, we published an RFP for an implementation partner and are in the early stages of that procurement process. Our goal would be to start implementation in the first half of 2026. This would allow a go-live in several stages from the end of 2027 through 2028. The funding request through TIP for this project is $3.5 million in 2026, $7.6 million in 2027, and $5.5 million in 2028. The total amount requested is $16.6 million over 3 years. This budget would broadly support 3 main areas of expense. The first is the software costs during the implementation period. Second is backfill and staff augmentation for HR, finance, and IT. And last is the implementation partner. The third and last technology project I'd like to present is Telemi Building Blocks. This is a project initiated by the Regulatory Services Department with the desire to move towards a more proactive enforcement of rental properties. The initial funding for this project was in 2025 as part of TIP. The goals for this project are to provide a greater understanding of housing and building stock, as well as improved data for enhanced enforcement across a variety of scenarios. We do have a contract in place, and the team is currently working through testing and validation. The funding request through TIP for this project would be $71,000 in 2026. This would cover the remainder of the implementation and licensing costs through implementation. The last project I'll present is the Loring Greenway Systems Rehabilitation. This proposal addresses much-needed electrical and water infrastructure repairs along the Greenway, which serves as a key corridor for people walking, biking, and taking transit in our city. The project's goal is to support a more equitable transit system and improve mobility services, something residents have voiced as a clear priority. We are requesting $1.5 million in 2027 for this work. While the request originally came through the operating budget process, we've shifted it to the permanent improvement levy within TIP, which is a more traditional and appropriate funding source. We presented on this last year to the council, and it was adopted in the plan for TIP. This approach also provides Public Works with 2 years to prepare for the investment and align it with long-range planning. So thank you for the opportunity to present the technology improvement plan today, and I will now stand for questions.
Thank you. I'll recognize Council President Payne.
Thank you, Vice President Chugtai. I went in the queue last time, then I realized you were doing a separate presentation on the TIP, and my question's around the ERP project. I know that we had originally in this year's budget reduced that funding, and the original risk to that was that it would push funding further out, and we are currently in further out. And I know that we did have a meeting earlier in the year about being able to leverage a master service agreement with the state to continue that work despite that funding cut. And I was just curious if you could give us a status update, because what I see in today's presentation is that the funding request didn't increase substantially as a result of that. And so it seems to me that we were able to absorb some of that through that state MSA, or could you just remind me about how we were able to continue that work forward?
Yeah. Chair Chugtai, Council President, thank you for the question. We did sign through a state contract with the software vendor. I think what has happened over the past year is we have now better visibility into the software contract itself. One of the goals of negotiating the contract earlier this year was to lower the costs over the first 3 years through the implementation of the project as much as possible because of knowing what was happening with the budget. And so I think our estimates that we had in the proposal last year were higher than what we ended up signing that contract with. I think in addition, as we are closer now to the implementation partner, we've taken a really, really hard look at where we think the dollars are going to land from a budget year perspective, and we've tried to be as specific as possible to not over budget in a given year in order to roll that money over. And so that has resulted in us kind of shifting some of the dollar amounts out a little bit further.
That's really helpful. And now that I recall in our conversation, you did float the risk that you may have to come back and do an additional budget request depending on how those negotiations unfolded. So I'm really happy to hear that you were able to just really tightly manage that project. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Not seeing any, so I will direct the clerk to file that presentation. Thank you so much, Mr. Cameron. All right, with that, we are ready to move to our final agenda item, which is a report relating to municipal revenue. For this presentation, I will welcome up Director Andrew Hawkins from the Legislative Research and Oversight Division to present on this item. And as you're getting your presentation up, Director Hawkins, I will note that we have been joined by President Brandt from the Board of Estimate and Taxation, who has been anxiously awaiting this presentation. Welcome. Thank you for coming in today. Director Hawkins, whenever you're ready.
All right. Chair Chugtai, members of the committee, my name is Andrew Hawkins. I'm here on behalf of Legislative Research and Oversight to speak to you today about municipal revenue. I believe everybody has a packet, and as you'll see in the file, there's two different components to this. The slides that I'm going to be covering today are in reference to a couple of the pieces from the staff direction that related to the city, taxes that the city is able to collect, kind of city structure items. I then do touch on some pieces from the materials that Guidehouse produced for us that look at 9 other comparable cities and start to get into some more revenue stream options that the city can consider. All right, so again, just for background, I always include this so people understand what brought us here. This request, going back to the end of 2024, actually, has since actually come up through both BET and the council to build out a couple additional pieces that I think BET wanted to see. So we're always happy when we can incorporate items and ensure that this is going to have the largest impact and scope for the most people. Now, the crux of this request was getting into what the city can do without property taxes. So obviously, the first place I'm going to start is talking about property taxes. The reason to do this is just to make sure that we kind of cover the landscape and understand some of the nuance and complexities that are inherent with property taxes themselves. So, looking at the property tax level burden, right now, the national landscape, there's a trend of, it's not this is certainly not Minneapolis exclusive issue that we're facing, is that the share that property taxes make up for general funds, general fund dollars across cities nationwide is trending upwards. Cities have become much more reliant on property tax as their primary, or at least one of their major sources of revenue. The reason for this is generally that, similar to Minneapolis, states have started to really clamp down on what municipalities are allowed to do with property taxes. This includes putting in limits on how much levies can be increased, limitations on how the process that cities have to follow to increase any property tax levies, and then locking in place any assessment, the reassessment of property value over a period of time. So again, just for a number of reasons, like this has become kind of a central point of focus. It's also obviously something that every resident of the city that owns, their property is going to feel. One of the other issues with property tax fluctuations to property valuations and new construction impact the stability of property tax as a reliable and consistent source of revenue. As we've seen recently, again, for reasons that often can be outside of a city's control, you can have large market fluctuations that are going to substantially change the taxable base that a city has to pull from. When looking at property tax, and honestly probably anything across the board in relation to this, cities have to account for any adverse impacts that are going to contribute to any tipping point type issues. The idea behind this is obviously you can raise tax to a certain amount before there's going to be some adverse impact, whether that's for individuals' ability to pay, whether it's for residents that can no longer afford home ownership, people who have the mobility to do so, considering relocating elsewhere because of a tax burden. So understanding with any of these what those different tipping points might be is extremely important, because again, you don't want the positive of having more revenue that's for the city to work with is one thing, but it's good to know what the opportunity cost is going to be. Then the chart on the right is actually pulled from the city's budget book, and if for anybody with the electronic version, if you click on it, it'll take you there. But it's use that just to highlight that, again, absent additional revenue sources, the property tax for the city of Minneapolis will make up over half of the city's overall revenue in the coming years. At least that's the current projection track we're on. And then, as you see, not only does it become more than 50%, but it will continue to grow year over year. For this one, this is a 2025 property tax levy burden, something that, again, not necessarily exclusive to Minneapolis, but also something that, again, it's not quite as widespread across cities, just given the different way that local governments are structured across states nationwide. I don't know that individuals always are aware, absent looking at the chart that's in our budget book or asking the question, where our property tax revenues for the city of Minneapolis go. I think there's often a misconception that 100% of what's in Minneapolis property tax is coming to the city to fund city programs. In reality, that's not actually the case. So I have the breakdown that I'm using the chart from the budget book. But again, the largest chunk there, that's very patriotic 1776 for the park board, is the largest portion that's being taken for an entity that's not the city. But then even once you get into the funds that are coming into the city, those are still broken down for bond redemption, permanent improvement, pension-related, teacher retirement association, and then you have, when you get to the general fund, you're down to 65%. Now, moving into non-property tax revenue. So for this slide, I do want to start by noting we had a larger roll-down chart. I had to get it to fit. I had to merge and move some things, so I need to change two amounts. I'll amend this, ensure the clerk can update the file, but those two are for local government aid and municipal state aid. Local government aid is actually $81 million and then the municipal state aid is $5 million. So I think the numbers that were there were tied into two other things that we had that got removed, but everything didn't align, so I did want to make a note of that. Also, these items aren't intended to be an exhaustive list, but just to show where Minneapolis is pulling some of its intergovernmental revenue from. I think this is something that also, I mean, even outside of the property tax conversation, has been the topic of discussion due to a lot of changes at the federal level as far as what funding is available, what funding is no longer going to be available. And then the issue being that we're going to see that trickle down to the state, since a lot of state money that the city can receive often is the state's a pass-through, where the money's coming from the federal side. So I don't know that one could make a fair assumption that the state will just step in lieu of the federal government. So this is definitely something that I think we're going to want to keep an eye on. Obviously, from the federal side, we get a lot from housing and urban development as one of the primary sources of funding. Two, to touch on, I know it was something that came out in the landscape analysis, but in comparison to some of its other peer cities, the city of Minneapolis is slightly more reliant on federal, state, and local government revenues as a source of income. Next, we're going to look at special use taxes. So Minneapolis currently has an entertainment tax that is 3% citywide. That can apply to admission fees, sporting events, concerts, lodging, sales during the events. And I did note, again, it's interesting to kind of read what qualifies and what doesn't. Because everything all the way down to pub games like pool and darts is somehow covered. I'm not sure how the city's collecting that, but the fact that those are noted was of interest. For things that are not currently covered by this 3% entertainment tax, any transportation fees, so anybody that's traveling to or from any of the events, there's no 3% addition that's included on that, and then athletic, health, and golf clubs or facility fees is not included. The city also has a lodging tax of 3%. It is a 3% on room rental expense explicitly. So there's also state requires a city's combined lodging tax cannot exceed 6.5%. And then also just to get an idea for sort of where these are right now, for 2025, the entertainment tax was budgeted to bring in $26.9 million, and the lodging tax was budgeted at $8.6 million. Next, the other additional tax that Minneapolis has is a Minneapolis downtown taxing area. This is an additional 3% that applies to restaurant and liquor sales within the boundary that you can see outlined in red. The biggest issue with this, and I believe this has been something that the city's identified as a legislative priority, I'm not sure where it's at this year, but when this map was drawn, I believe the city of Minneapolis looks slightly different. The thing that's the most notable with this map is that the Minneapolis downtown taxing area was intended to tax, again, essentially entertainment districts. One of the city's more recent entertainment districts is almost entirely cut out. That's the North Loop. So obviously the issue that you have there is that in the span of one block, there could be venues that are operating outside of that 3% tax, whereas one block in the other direction, they're going to be subject to that tax. So just something to identify. I'm sure if we sat here and everybody drew a circle around what they thought was downtown, they would all look different, but I don't know that anybody would draw a map that looked like this. Next, we get into license and fee revenue. This is something that exists across any city that we're going to look at. However, for the city of Minneapolis, this is currently, I think, our biggest bucket as far as where we're bringing in the most revenue. Just looking at some examples of this, we have charges for services. Those are services that are provided by the city that can include water, waste, utilities, inspections. Our charges for sales, I think that one it matches up with exactly what it sounds like, just the sales of equipment, parts, supplies, and things like that. Our licensing and permitting. Obviously, there's a very wide range of licenses and permits that are required for different things. Also brings in $46 million. Looking at that in the two different categories for non-business licensing and permits, that can be, again, building, planning, plumbing, mechanical. That's that $31 million, and then rental housing, liquor, beer sales, food, business, and amusement. We're in the business licenses. That's 14.9. And then finally, something that most people are familiar with, especially if you own a property, special assessment fees are currently at $34 million. Next, so for all of these services, most of them primarily, there's going to be license fees, that are established by the city. These usually come up for review annually. We just have an example of one of the sheets that you've probably seen come before you recently for the proposed 2026 license fees. The fee schedules are broken down into very broad categories. I think the last I was looking, the city had more than 600 at least. So again, I'm sure it's a lot to review, but it's something that comes up from time to time. There is currently a fee study that's also being done to kind of see where these fall in relation to comparable cities. But the most familiar ones that people are going to know would be parking ramps, lots, and meters. That's $41 million that are brought in by that. Obviously, that's something where, with the tipping point, you can increase it to a point. But if it gets up too high, then individuals can't afford to park. If it's too low, you're missing out on revenue. All right. And lastly, for this section, part of the request was to look at departments that were funded. I actually believe it was worded departments that were funded outside of the general fund. And so what I'm going to note here is that from digging into some of this and like starting to pull out some of these pieces, it seemed easier just to identify what is on the general fund. Because almost every department in the city has at least one or two different funding sources that it's pulling from, and it can often be extremely complex. Sometimes those funds are going to be exclusive to the service that's being provided. Sometimes it's going to be more of a general fund that can get moved around. And so tracing all of those back is certainly something that is worthwhile, but it would create probably more confusion for the purposes of a presentation. I'll also note that for some of just because a group is not listed as general fund only, doesn't mean that everything's equal as far as how much of their budget is being funded through, again, one of these other government funds, whether it's special revenue, capital projects. I think actually city clerk is a good example, because when this came up, I had asked our city clerk, and I believe he said that the outside funding that's captured for the clerk's office is something that we get for running the printing center, and it's a couple $1,000s. So that's obviously going to pale in comparison to some of these buckets that might be millions. All right, now to get into our national landscape. There's a lot on this slide. I will note too, on this one, the municipal state aid was copied over from the previous one, so that's actually 5, not 17, but local government aid is correct. The reason I put this together, it's almost deliberately a lot, and the whole idea is to show why it's a massive challenge to compare municipalities apples to apples. Because every city is structured differently. Every city has access to different resources. They might operate in different environments as far as regulation, and so cities, it falls to the cities to best design a revenue stream and revenue options that match their individual circumstances. So again, while this is by no means exhausted, just pulled out some items for comparison from Minneapolis to Kansas City to Boston. And so some of the things that you'll see that are very different. Obviously, Kansas City, there are limitations from their truth in taxation policy that's a limiting factor on them increasing their property taxes. So that base for them is a lot smaller than what we're going to see. However, they have a 1% city earnings tax that's taken off of, I believe it's any resident of Kansas City or anybody that's earning where the income is earned in Kansas City. That brings in $373 million to offset their shorter intake or their smaller intake of property taxes. Again, for the city, you just saw me go through all of these, so just kind of highlighting some areas where there's very large discrepancies that, again, could be looked into further. The hotel and motel tax in Kansas City is $36 million, whereas what we brought back for the lodging tax, I think what's budgeted in '25 was $8 million. So I'm not sure, again, what are they doing to pull in, significantly more revenue from their lodging tax. Looking at, there's also the marijuana tax sales on both sides. Again, those buckets are extremely different. You would expect Boston as a bigger city to be higher. It's not, just based on the way that the states regulate and allocate the funds to municipalities in each of those locations. But that is something that I know is rolling out in the state, so something to keep an eye on as far as what the impact is for the city. Also, Boston has Logan International Airport. They have a tax on, I believe it's, I can't remember, a couple percent on every gallon of fuel that's sold at the airport. So that's $40 million that they're bringing in. They also have, it's essentially, I think, a pass-through tax where the state's levied its authority to do a tax in lieu of property tax, and that's through the motor vehicle. It's $25 per $1,000 of valuation, so every vehicle in Boston has to pay that. That generates $59 million. So again, just the way that the cities work with the state, the way that counties work with the state, it really does make it hard, absent standardization, to do sort of that apples to apples, because obviously with a county and a school district and a city operating in the same space, there's a lot of room for overlap, and the how services are provided isn't always going to be seen as an apples to apples thing. All right. Now, getting into our national landscape comparison. So we had worked with Guidehouse to review, it's actually 9 comparable cities, and plus Minneapolis is 10, to identify similarities, differences, where there might be opportunities to look at different revenue sources and kind of what those structures would look like in the city of Minneapolis. This comparison required the data to be standardized, as I alluded to in the previous slide. Just because, again, all those complexities and available revenue sources. So the data source that they used has a good formula and like a complex methodology that is able to accomplish that. And then I will note, again, as a further encouragement to read through Guidehouse's deck that everybody should have, based on the City Council's direction and input on high priority revenue generating strategies, our next step will be to explore the applicability and feasibility for those items in Minneapolis, with the goal of bringing that back in November. All right, so just to highlight and this is all also available in Guidehouse's preliminary report, but a summary of findings, and I'll just, these are in italics because I just pulled direct quotes, so I didn't want to misrepresent anything, but again, they found Minneapolis is relatively more dependent on intergovernmental revenue as a share of total revenue, and generates less revenue per capita than most of its peers, which indicates an opportunity to expand and diversify own source revenue. Minneapolis also can increase revenue generation by implementing new strategies inspired by peer cities. That one just building on that, that lower generation per capita that we're seeing. Leading examples that they observed of revenue generation strategies included land transfer tax, various forms of income tax, business tax, congestion pricing, excise tax, payment in lieu of taxes, and service fees. Minneapolis is dependent on property tax revenue, indicating an opportunity to diversify its tax portfolio within the limits of state law. That last part's going to be really big because what we are allowed to do by state law is very, very narrow. Compared to a lot of other cities, Minneapolis is very restricted in terms of anything that even starts to resemble a tax becomes an issue at the state level. Just to highlight a couple pieces from the Guidehouse report. Of the 10 cities that were reviewed, Minneapolis ranked 9th in per capita revenue. So I think only Minneapolis was at $7,503 per capita, whereas Kansas City was the only city that came in lower at $6,578. Just a couple other ones just to indicate where the scale was at. Atlanta was 8,135. Seattle was up to 11,000. Looking at the next one, Minneapolis ranked 10th in per capita revenue generated from taxes alone. So the closest, Minneapolis came in at $2,421 per capita. The next in 9th was Kansas City with $3,239. That scale keeps going up with Portland at $4,266, Seattle at $5,167. So obviously there's quite a bit of space between where the city sees itself now and where some of those cities are operating. Minneapolis does have relatively higher property taxes rates compared to peer cities. It was 3rd out of 10, and it does face limitations, again, with how much we can increase these rates without seeing some adverse impact. However, the thing I will note, too, I think Minneapolis was 1.25. The only cities ahead of it, Kansas City was 1.37, and Portland was 1.68. Another area of complexity with this is that, again, there are some cities where we see high property tax, or we see low property tax rates, but a high property tax bill, because this is going to always correlate to what the property values are in a certain area and how they're applying the tax. So again, having a high or low property tax rate doesn't necessarily equate, on a direct basis to a low property tax bill. And then last, Minneapolis was 4th out of 10 in per capita revenue from charges for public services, which I talked about being one of our bigger buckets. But we did see a couple cities that were coming in higher. We were at $2,005. Seattle was at $2,400. Denver, $3,700. And San Francisco was, I think, all the way at $5,100. All right. So right here, I wanted to pull out, obviously, this is all provided in a lot more detail in Guidehouse's preliminary report, where we can actually get into some examples. I'll touch on some now. But these are the three main buckets where revenue sources are going to come from: taxes, charges, and miscellaneous revenue. For taxes, again, looking at like some of these different options that I've mentioned before, if we want to look at specific programs, for excise tax, this would be something like a beverage tax. The city currently has, it was plastic bags. I think it's maybe expanded to just bags in general. So things that are targeted at one specific, usually a specific item or activity. The income tax, I touched on Kansas City having that 1% earnings tax. Philadelphia also has an income tax that's related to funding its schools. Business taxes, Seattle actually had two of the most kind of discussed examples for this, where they had their a payroll tax for companies, for individuals that were paid over a certain amount. And then they also have a percentage-based tax on businesses that ties into the city's social housing work. The land transfer tax is increasingly common. It's also been referred to as a mansion tax. New York and San Francisco are the two kind of notable examples there right now. For looking at pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes. This has been an increasing source of revenue for a number of cities. Boston is sort of the primary one in this space right now. Again, it's been a number of years, and they're kind of continuing to revise it, but it basically stemmed from them realizing that half of their potential tax base was exempt. There's obviously, with Boston, there's a lot of schools, hospitals, things that are going to be outside of tax collection, but all of those organizations were still still leveraging city services, roads, emergency services, things of that nature. So Boston came up with a formula. They did again a lot of work group and a lot of collaboration with these organizations to figure out what their potential tax bill would be, and then in order to offset that, they have a formula to acknowledge the public benefit from the existence and operation of those entities. So, Harvard, Boston, Boston College, Boston University, so that offsets that total payment, and then they come up with what's left, which is their pilot payment. As far as how that operates, not being a formal tax, it's sort of works on an honor system. They make everything public, so residents, whoever's interested, can go look and see what percentage of that dollar amount each organization that falls under the pilot program has paid to date. I will note too, for Kansas City, I think they had a much smaller amount, but they had, I believe, started to look at kind of something similar as well. So recognizing that our options are limited when things start to resemble a tax. Because of the voluntary nature of the pilot program, I think that one operates outside of that space. And then last, the empty homes tax. So that is something that the city has, but it's more in relation to abandoned homes that I think is more focused on blight. But there are some cities that are looking at empty homes and taxing them, since obviously that impacts your available housing stock. And so whether that's seasonal residences, homes that are being used for, again, the VRBO and things like that. But I think cities have realized that there might be an opportunity there to track and receive some revenue from those. Looking at charges real quick, just congestion charge, New York did it. Everybody's heard of that one. As far as going into the area of recommendations, that one likely requires federal approval because it's going to touch roads and Department of Transportation, which I think right now is probably viewed as a limiting factor. Asset monetization is just looking at what do we currently have in the city that's that we could be leveraging some kind of income from. Outdoor advertising was one that's talked about there. Service fees, you've already heard me discuss. And then miscellaneous revenue, special service districts, which we're already currently operating, or betterment levies. Very often we see these applied to cities where parks operate within the scope of the city as a department. All right. Challenges and opportunities, and this is my last slide. So again, challenges. State laws and regulation. I started by talking about it, and we're going to finish by talking about it because it's inescapable. The state is very, very restrictive on this, and so to the extent the city wants to pursue some of these, it's going to be important to figure out what's going to be palatable at the state level to get the approval to go forward. Capacity and structure, beyond just putting something in place. Again, I'll use the pilot program as an example. Either what capacity and structure does the city have to collect the revenue, or if it doesn't exist, what does the capacity and structure look like? So what would we have to build out? Because obviously, if it's anything in addition to what we're currently doing, how is that cost offset by what we're going to be collecting? And then again, the adverse impact. And so for that one, like I said, as prices go up, there's going to be behavioral changes, in another area. So it's just something with each of these, considering, the entirety of the impact is going to be a point of emphasis. However, looking at opportunities, I think that we can, again, identify potential high revenue options for additional review, and then we can discuss those further in November. But also, again, just considering the city's legislative priorities. It's one thing to go forward with a new tax that we're proposing. It's another to bring, again, that map, to just, it's something tangible that they can see and potentially understand that, that what we've called downtown and doesn't necessarily reflect what anybody else might view as downtown. And that it's putting other businesses at a disadvantage and incentivizing potential development and operation and explicitly in certain areas of the city. And then last, monitoring related work that may impact city revenues or how city allocates its money or its funds. So the one I'll note, there's an ongoing fee study that's currently underway, and I did link to the directive just to reference. And then additionally, I think this is in very early stages, and they would have to speak to it directly, but the city auditor has a workforce optimization and comparative benchmarking study that I think is, again, the intent of looking across at the landscape of other cities and how they're doing this and how resources and funds are allocated compared to how we're doing to see if the city's low, high, or otherwise. And then additionally, I mentioned it earlier, but the continued rollout and implementation of state cannabis regulation, revenue collection, and whether or not the money that's received from that will offset anything for the city. With that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I'm more than happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Director Hawkins. I understand that you will be returning back before this body to further discuss with us based on some additional work that needs to be done following this preliminary report about the feasibility of some of the specific tactics or tactics that have been identified so far. So I want to note that for colleagues as we begin discussion. I see two members in queue, so I'll recognize Council Member Cashman, followed by Council Member Palmisano.
Thank you, Chair Chugtai, and thank you, Director Hawkins. I just wanted to start by thanking you for all of this great information. I think it's going to be useful, not just for us, but for a lot of other people in the city, Park Board, Board of Estimate and Taxation, other levels of government who are grappling with these questions. And I wanted to express to the City Council, to my colleagues, that I have been supportive of expanding the downtown taxing boundary, and I know Representative Agbaje has carried a bill on that, and I think it's really wise for us to expand into the North Loop, but I did support lowering the food and beverage rate from 3 down to 2.5%, because I feel that for downtown residents, a lot of the restaurants, we don't have a lot of grocery stores downtown, so restaurants are a source of food, and so having a higher tax on food in restaurants downtown, I think, makes downtown a more expensive place to live. But I just wanted to ask you a couple questions about property tax exemptions in the city. Which types of buildings are currently exempt from paying property taxes? And did you look into if any of the other cities have modernized that or changed that over the years in terms of religious or nonprofit institutions paying property taxes?
Chair Chugtai, Councilmember Cashman, offhand, I don't know what the city's current definitions are outside of the traditional, entities that we'd see with higher education, hospitals, and nonprofits. I know there's an application process, and I think our assessor actually maintains, because that's what I was using just to sort of get a base for what was exempt, and so going through it. Those are the three main buckets, but I can certainly look into that and respond back via follow-up. I think it is, even looking at Boston, the way that they went about their pilot program, obviously one of the, I think things I mentioned was religious organizations. Churches aren't included in their pilot program. It looks like it's explicitly working with universities, hospitals, and then I believe there's certain categories of nonprofits, I think the Philharmonic is one of the ones that they get a pilot payment from. Mm-hmm. So if that's something the city wants to look at, then I think getting that list and figuring out how we're doing the classifications and whether or not that needs to be revisited is definitely a logical step.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And then did any of the other cities that you looked at have a land value tax, which is something I know the state legislature has proposed and moved forward that would enable Minneapolis to do that?
I'm not going to be able to remember offhand who it was, but yes, like there's definitely cities out there that have, again, land value taxes, and I'm trying to think, there's one other that's escaping me that was very similar. But as I mentioned, we're not the only people experiencing the same issue right now. And so cities, across the country are currently trying to look at, every other potential revenue source they might have because, the continued increase of the levy as our main source of income isn't sustainable. So yes, I do know that is something that's in place, and I can figure out exactly where, and if you want me to follow up with that.
That would be great. Yeah,
All right.
I would appreciate that information. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you for this presentation. A couple of clarifications. I don't believe special service districts provide the city with any additional revenue other than the services that they are buying up and paying for, right? But did you mean that they could be, like we could basically upcharge them?
No, sorry, good point of clarification, Chair Chugtai, Councilmember Palmisano. So special service districts, more broadly, but I actually think this is still same to the city. Anything that's allocated or brought in, has to apply to the district itself directly. So I can't remember if in the city if we're currently leveraging any revenues from them, but there are other cities that operate special service districts where there's some degree of a revenue generating component that then is used to fund the special service district
I see.
itself.
So they're running at a profit in other cities, and we're doing this as a pass-through type service.
I believe so.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned plastic bags. That 5-cent fee is charged and kept by the business. That's not a revenue stream that comes into our city. Are you suggesting that in other cities that the bag fees go back to the city somehow?
Yep. That is correct. So again, I know firsthand from living in Washington, D.C. when they passed it, it was used to, I think, to clean up the Anacostia River. Was an explicit fund that they had established for that fee. So I don't know if that's something the city can explore, but it's certainly, again, what it looks like across municipalities is obviously not the same.
Yeah. That brings me to my interest in the challenge you list state laws and regulation. Does Minneapolis have any authority to pursue a new tax or other income revenue option without state intervention?
I'm going to cautiously look at our city attorney and who can jump in if I start to dive into any areas that I shouldn't. But I think I'm going to keep it pretty high level. From the preliminary look at this, anything that we consider a tax or that's applied in the same way that a tax would be applied, we need to go. It requires state approval. So I think that is something where the city's very limited outside of what it currently has and is collecting. So. As far as other sources of revenue, I think that's more open-ended. Like I said, with the pilot, the way that other cities have done the pilot collections is that it's voluntary, so it's not a tax. The businesses are willfully paying in because they're benefiting from city services that they may not be paying for through the traditional tax method. So that's going to the voluntary nature of it is what is getting those in place in cities that have pretty similar laws to what we have here.
So pilot taxes might make sense for the colleges and universities that you mentioned, but in my understanding, pilot were about things that we don't really have here in our city, like DNR land, state parks, watershed management entities, and that sort of thing. Is that also your understanding?
So it's going to depend by city how much of an actual base they have for pilot. In the city, in Minneapolis, just looking through we do have a decent amount of exempt. It would be a matter of having to kind of figure out exactly what buckets those are in. We have, the university one, depending on how much land, the U has. It's something that you could probably scope out fairly easily in terms of what we're looking at as far as cost, revenue, participation wise. St. Paul recently, again, it's not an apples to apples thing, but I believe that the tax at St. Paul, or the increase in the levy that they had approved last year, the year before, the justification for it was in part that they have a high volume of university and state government land in St. Paul that obviously was not a usable tax base. So again, whether or not that's a complete correlation or just a talking point is not for me to decide, but I mean, it is fair to say that there's a good volume of land in St. Paul that would fall into the same situation that Boston had. So where the city's at, I think, again, it would be easy enough just by pulling the exempt rolls, because I believe that has usually the square footage or the frontage of the property, as well as the estimated values of the property are assessed as well. So outside of pilot, again, the city's main revenue generation is going to be the services provided. So the services and the fee schedules, which, like I said, I know there's currently work going on to look at how those compare to other jurisdictions, but that's something that, again, the city council would have more control over, because those come back to you for approval every year. So if there are some outliers or some areas where we're just not collecting what we should be, it's worth a discussion. I'll also note too that even to the extent that we can collect something, and the extent to the extent that we are, may not be in perfect alignment. A lot of these, again, they can be very resource intensive to collect everything that the city might be able to. I think that right now, the rental lodging tax and how that applies to Airbnb, VRBO type rentals, I don't know. I know that's been a point of conversation, so that's something that, again, there's better places in the city of Reg Services to speak to it than myself, but I think it can be hard to track all of those, especially if they're operating outside of the city's current rental home permitting system.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Wonderful. Council President Payne.
Thank you, Vice President Chugtai. Thank you for this presentation. I also just wanted to thank President Brandt for joining us and helping initiate some of these conversations on the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Also wanted to thank Councilmember Wansley, who brought forward the initial staff direction. It was later refined to represent the fact that we were doing this in a more collaborative way with the Board of Estimate and Taxation. But I think this is just really critical work as we look to the future, because I don't think we can depend on just a pure property tax levy anymore in the way that we have historically done that. And I'm looking forward to working, especially with Chair of IGR, Councilmember Chowdhury, on maybe doing some power mapping around where the state legislature is in terms of some of these really tactical recommendations that were brought forward. So just really appreciate this work. Thank you.
Wonderful. With that, we have concluded the discussion on this item. We look forward to having you back in November. I will ask the clerk to file this presentation. And with that, we have concluded all business to come before this committee today. And without objection, we are adjourned until our next meeting, which will take place on Monday, October 27th at 10 a.m., where we will receive our final set of departmental presentations prepared by the Climate Legacy Initiative and the city's capital budget. Thank you, everyone.